A powerful billionaire needs an immediate heir to save his empire, and his solution is unthinkable. He asks his virgin secretary, Anisa, the one person who secretly loves him, to bear his twins via a cold transactional contract. What shocking betrayal does Anisa uncover after risking her deepest self for him? And when she vanishes, activating a devastating counterplan that threatens to collapse his entire company, can he sacrifice his wealth, his control, and his very identity to prove his love is worth more than the corporate legacy she just destroyed? Hello, everyone, and a huge warm welcome back to the channel. I'm James, and if you thought that hook sounded intense, trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. We're diving straight into the fire with Liam and Anisa's story, a saga of betrayal, impossible sacrifices, and a love that was almost destroyed by a single, desperate contract. This is the kind of redemption story that will grab your heart and not let go. So, if you're ready for the ultimate emotional roller coaster, the high stakes, the shocking secrets, and the powerful ending, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, ring the notification bell so you don't miss a beat, and grab your snacks because you are going to want to watch this story right until the very last frame. Let's jump right into Chapter 1. The air in Liam Ward's penthouse office was always too thin, too cold. It was the 45th floor of Manhattan's corporate fortress, all polished concrete and seamless glass that threw the autumn sky back at itself. Anisa Khan, his executive assistant and, more importantly, his best friend, rarely felt the chill. She brought her own warmth, a quiet, grounded strength that had been Liam's ballast since they were undergraduates. But today, even her brown skin felt cool against the silk of her tailored jacket. Liam wasn't behind the enormous black steel desk. He was pacing near the window, his silhouette cutting a sharp, agonizing figure against the glittering backdrop of the city he owned. He was 31, white-hot, successful, effortlessly handsome, a man who negotiated fate, but today, fate had negotiated him. Anisa, shut the door. His voice was low, flat, devoid of the familiar, easy authority. She did as she was told, the click of the latch sounding deafening in the vast silence. She knew the cadence of his moods better than he did. This wasn't market trouble or a hostile bid. This was personal and terrifying. "I got the final results from Dr. Alistair yesterday," he began, turning to face her. His eyes, usually sharp and focused, were haunted. "It's a specific genetic sequence, aggressive, and it's progressive. 6 months. That's the absolute maximum window they can guarantee for a viable, natural conception." Anisa's breath hitched. She didn't move, didn't dare to. She had been Liam's shield against the world since his parents' tragic loss. But this was a wound she couldn't block. "The Ward Trust is ironclad. My uncle knows about the diagnosis, or at least he suspects enough. If I fail to produce an heir, a clear, legitimate one, within a year of the official discovery, the entire company, Ether Global, dissolves into a hostile buyout. He gets everything." Liam ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting the expensive precision. "I won't let him dismantle my father's legacy." The words tumbled out, fast and clinical, betraying the turmoil underneath. He was back to being the CEO, erecting his emotional walls. "I have tried to find a way around the clause. Adoption is out. Surrogacy is messy. Donor eggs are too complicated for the legal definition of blood lineage. I need certainty, Anisa. I need absolute control over the variable." He finally crossed the marble floor, stopping before her. He wasn't looking at her face, but somewhere over her shoulder. "You are the only person I trust implicitly. You know the company, you know the stakes, and you know me." Anisa felt the familiar, dangerous surge of devotion and suppressed love. "He needs me. He finally needs me." She waited, heart hammering against her ribs, ready to offer anything. What he offered, however, was a sheet of embossed paper, folded with chilling precision. I need you to have my children. Anisa felt the floor tilt. Liam, I don't understand. I thought you said natural conception. I did. He gripped her arms, his touch hot and urgent, the first genuine human contact since he started speaking. I need you, Anisa. You are my most reliable asset. You have the stability, the clean slate, the commitment to my family name that no stranger or fleeting acquaintance could ever offer. You're my best friend. This is the only way I secure the company, and the only way I get the family I was meant to have. He released her, stepping back to let the chilling weight of his words settle. And I need more than one. I need a guarantee against the genetic shadow hanging over me. I need twins. Twins. The request was monstrous in its ambition, in its lack of human warmth. He gestured toward the contract, which she now saw was drafted by the firm's top succession lawyer. It outlined a vast sum, enough money to buy her 10 lifetimes of comfort, and chillingly it contained a non-disclosure and non-claim clause that spanned decades, forbidding her from ever demanding more than the agreed-upon financial compensation. He was asking her for the impossible, to give him her body and her future, but never her heart. It was the ultimate cold transaction. Anisa slowly unfolded the document, her fingers tracing the sharp, unforgiving lines of the legal jargon. It wasn't a marriage proposal. It was a hostile takeover of her soul. She saw the betrayal clearly. He was exploiting her trust, her devotion, and the secret knowledge of her love for him to solve his corporate crisis. She looked up, meeting his eyes across the glittering, predatory city view. She saw the terror and the calculation battling behind his gaze. You're asking me to be a vessel, Liam, a guaranteed variable in your equation. Her voice was a bare whisper, heavy with 10 years of unspoken love. I'm asking you to save everything, he countered, his voice rough. To save the legacy. To save me. Anisa looked down at the contract, feeling the weight of the ink, the paper, the billions it represented. She could sign it, take the money, and be done. She could protect her heart. But that wasn't how she loved. With a sudden, decisive motion that shocked even Liam, she ripped the document straight down the middle, then again reducing the pages to 4 ragged quadrants. No, Liam, there will be no contract. If I do this, if I give you the family you demand, it will be on my terms, not yours. You think you need a guarantee? You think you need a signature? I will give you my guarantee, Liam, but you will pay for it with more than just money. Because I have waited 28 years for true love, and if you want my body, you must first earn my entire untouched heart. You will take me as a man who chooses the woman, not the CEO who hires the secretary. I will only give you my sanctuary through trust, not transaction. And that, Liam, is a promise I will never break. The silence that followed Anisa's declaration was deeper and more absolute than the drop from the 45th floor. The 4 torn pieces of the contract floated forgotten onto the pristine marble floor, the remnants of Liam's carefully constructed safety net. Liam stared at her, not with anger at the destruction of the document, but with a shock that stripped away his CEO facade, leaving the vulnerable, terrified man exposed. He saw the fire in her brown eyes, a ferocity he'd never witnessed in their decade of friendship, and he finally understood the true weight of her sacrifice. Your sanctuary? He questioned, his voice a raw whisper. Anisa, you know what I'm asking. You know the clinical reality, and you know the urgency. I know the urgency of your legacy, she corrected, her voice now steady, cold, and clear. I know the urgency of the ward name, but I am telling you the urgency of my heart. I have waited for the man who sees me, not my efficiency, not my loyalty, not my convenience. I have waited for the man who sees the woman I chose to be, who respects the vulnerability I chose to save. She stepped forward, forcing him to hold her gaze. You came to me with a transaction because you think my integrity is negotiable. It is not. I will not be your controlled variable, Liam. I will be your partner in this. If you can look at me and finally choose a human connection over a legal clause. He swallowed hard. The risk was monumental. Without the contract, she was free to leave the moment the twins were conceived, free to demand a portion of his empire, free to destroy his reputation. Yet, her demand was the ultimate compliment, a demand for authenticity. It appealed to the tiny, honest core of him that his ambition had suppressed. "And what does that choice entail?" he asked, the words forced past his dry throat. He was negotiating blind now, with stakes far higher than any billion-dollar deal. "It entails this: no more penthouse, no more ether global. You will shut down the noise, the pressure, the external forces that keep you from being real. We will go somewhere isolated, where the only thing that matters is the clock and the connection we must forge. You will commit fully to the act of creating a family, not completing a transaction." A complete leave of absence? Liam's corporate mind reeled. The hostile bid is 2 months out. If your company falls because you chose honesty over fear for 1 month, then it deserved to fall, Anisa countered, unforgiving. "But I know you, Liam. You will find a way to manage it remotely. This is about proving to me and to yourself that you can prioritize something other than the bottom line." He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the audacity of her demand. She was forcing him to dismantle the very identity he had built to protect himself. She was demanding his soul as collateral. "You're asking me to throw away every contingency, every safety net I have ever created," he stated, his tone flat with realization. "I am asking you to trust the only person who has ever truly had your back," Anisa insisted. "You asked me to trust you with my body, with my future, with my heart's ultimate sacrifice. You will give me the same trust in return. No lawyers, no contracts, and no mention of the money ever again. If we succeed as partners. If we fail as partners." Liam stared at the torn paper on the floor, the remnants of his cold calculation. He saw the sheer, terrifying vulnerability of her demand, the incredible risk she was taking for a love she believed existed beneath his armor. He understood. She was giving him one final chance to be the man she loved. The 6-month clock was ticking. He had no time to find an alternative. He stepped towards her, the last vestiges of his CEO control falling away. He reached out and gently cupped her face, his touch reverent, almost trembling. "Where?" he whispered, his voice thick with a mix of fear, relief, and emerging desire. "Where do we go?" "The secluded villa you keep in St. Barth's," Anisa answered, her voice softening slightly. "It is away from the city, away from the judgment. We leave tonight. I will send my resignation to the board immediately." He nodded slowly, sealing the silent, impossible pact. He saw the hope surge into her eyes, a hope he knew he hadn't yet earned. He knew he had to play the part of the willing partner, even as his mind clung to the hidden thought. "I still need an exit strategy. The company depends on it." He pulled her into a tight, desperate embrace, not the hug of a lover, but the desperate grasp of a drowning man. He held her close, feeling the fragile strength of her body against his. This was his chosen guarantor, his only hope for the future, and the woman whose heart he was knowingly preparing to break. Liam released her, his eyes dark with commitment and a terrible hidden guilt. "I will manage the logistics," he said, his voice regaining its steel. "We leave by private jet in 3 hours. But Anisa," he paused, the words chillingly deliberate, "your act of faith is noted. Now let me be clear on my end. The Ward legacy will be secured, whatever it takes." He turned away, picking up his phone to call his lawyer, not to inform him the contract was shredded, but to issue a single, chilling new directive. Activate the digital non-compete clause immediately. Ensure she is still classified as a vital, highly compensated asset, with an ironclad sunset clause once the mission is complete. Liam moved with the ruthless efficiency of a general preparing for war, but even his meticulous planning couldn't fully wall off the internal chaos. 3 hours after the shredded contract hit the floor of his Manhattan penthouse, their private jet sliced through the Atlantic night. He hadn't informed his legal team that Anisa had physically destroyed the document. Instead, he issued a chilling internal directive, ensuring her employment status was digitally classified with a highly complex, secret sunset clause. It was a cold hedge against the trust Anisa was trying to force upon him, a final act of calculated cruelty aimed at securing his eventual emotional and corporate escape. The St. Barth's villa, set high on a cliff overlooking a churning turquoise sea, was a sanctuary of exquisite, brutal isolation. It was a place of blinding white stucco, endless horizons, and cool, dark mahogany. A landscape built for escape, but which now served as a gilded prison for their impossible, intimate pact. The first week was an agony of tense, deliberate proximity. Anisa moved through the space with quiet dignity, consciously refusing to be treated as a hired employee. She cooked, she read on the terrace, and she managed the villa staff with the same natural grace and quiet authority she used to run Ether Global's boardroom. She was deliberately building the image of a home, attempting to subtly replace his ambition with the undeniable reality of domestic partnership. Liam, meanwhile, was visibly adrift. Stripped of his daily power struggles and the deafening noise of his office, he was a billionaire lost at sea. He had nothing to negotiate, no market to exploit, only the terrifying landscape of his own heart and the woman who now held his entire future hostage to her truth. She had successfully dismantled the external fortifications of his life, forcing him into a pure, unscripted reality. Their moments of intimacy were high-wire acts of profound vulnerability. They began with a hesitant, almost religious reverence. For Anisa, giving herself to Liam, the man she had silently worshipped for a decade, was the terrifying culmination of her deepest, most sacred hope. It was an act of faith she poured into every touch, every shared breath. She held nothing back, offering him her complete, absolute sanctuary, praying that the warmth of her sacrifice would finally melt the cold fear that encased him. Liam was unmistakably overwhelmed by the experience. Being with Anisa was nothing like the detached, meaningless flings of his corporate past. He encountered her as an entirely new landscape, honest, unreserved, fiercely present, and utterly his. He found himself marveling not just at the physical act, but at the light she brought back into his shadowed life, the first genuine laughter he'd produced since his parents' passing. He saw her quick intelligence, her steady compassion, the sheer, quiet strength that made his own ruthless ambition feel brittle and fragile by comparison. He began to look forward to the moments they shared, not because they fulfilled the mission of conception, but because they offered a terrifying, unexpected peace. He knew he was falling. The feeling was a glorious, frightening descent. But the fear of the 6-month deadline, of the hostile takeover, and most cripplingly, the fear of losing control, acted like a tightening wire, preventing him from confessing the truth of his emerging love. He treated her like spun glass, precious, vital, but always temporary. He could not, would not allow himself to believe that the woman he needed to guarantee his future could also be the woman who was meant to be his heart. Anisa noticed the changes in him too, and for a fleeting, dangerous moment allowed herself to hope. His kisses became less desperate and more questioning, his hand resting on her shoulder as they watched the violent Caribbean sunset would linger with the proprietary tenderness of a man who didn't want to let go. But the moment their shared intimacy faded and the mundane returned, the CEO would instantly resurface, cold and distant, immediately retreating to his secure, encrypted satellite phone connection to manage the hostile bid against Ether Global. One blisteringly hot afternoon, while Anisa was tidying up the coastal study, a small act of normalcy she maintained, she found a small, unmarked USB drive tucked deep beneath a stack of geopolitical reports. Liam had left the room minutes earlier, utterly confident that his private effects were secure. Curiosity, combined with the heavy suspicion planted by his coldness and the memory of the lawyer's text, compelled her. She slipped the USB into the study's secure tablet. The drive wasn't protected by a password, a catastrophic oversight born of his complete trust in her loyalty. It contained a single, meticulously detailed legal document, dated the day after they arrived at the villa. It wasn't the original contract, but a supplemental memorandum titled Contingency Plan Gamma. The language was dense, intentionally obfuscating, but the meaning was a punch to the gut. It outlined the complex legal mechanism ensuring that, regardless of her non-contractual participation, Anisa was legally bound by an employment clause that expired precisely 1 month after the expected date of delivery for the twins. The memo even included a financial breakdown of the compensation package designed to minimize her future claim against the Ward estate once the heirs were safely secured. He hadn't stopped negotiating. He hadn't chosen her. He had simply changed the method of control. He had accepted her vulnerable gift, her sanctuary, while simultaneously building a hidden legal trap designed to secure his corporate escape once she was no longer vital to the mission. The betrayal was absolute, insidious, and confirmed. He was a coward who had used her love as his shield. Anisa quietly removed the USB drive. She didn't confront him immediately. She couldn't. Her body was already engaged in the sacred, terrifying work of conception. She walked out onto the terrace, the sun searing her brown skin, but it was the icy realization in her heart that truly burned. She was carrying his children. She had given him everything, and she was still, in his mind, just a highly valued, highly compensated, temporary asset. She had been played, and the knowledge was a bitter poison. That evening, Anisa moved through the villa, preparing dinner with a deceptive calm, her smile perfectly intact. When Liam returned from his daily tense calls with the board, she greeted him warmly, her eyes glittering with a strange, fierce light he foolishly mistook for devotion. During dinner, she steered the conversation to Ether Global, asking pointed, specific questions about his uncle's strategy and the delicate state of the shareholder loyalty. Liam, surprised and flattered by her sudden, acute interest, gave her highly sensitive, privileged details about his defense plan, viewing her engagement as a sign of her complete commitment to their shared mission. He told her everything, completely unaware that he was giving the woman he had just betrayed all the necessary ammunition to not just walk away, but to effectively dismantle his entire empire. As Liam finished detailing a critical vulnerability in his defense, a reliance on a single short-term debt instrument, Anisa leaned across the mahogany table. Her smile was soft, but her eyes were cold, calculating. "That is fascinating, Liam. You rely so heavily on that instrument, almost as heavily as you rely on contingency plans." She paused, holding his gaze. "Tell me, if you discovered that your most vital asset was preparing a counter-contingency of her own, one that could dismantle all your careful corporate defenses, would you panic, or would you finally learn to trust?" Liam laughed, dismissing the comment as a playful corporate joke, completely oblivious to the fact that his greatest corporate secret, the betrayal of her heart, was about to become his greatest financial liability. Liam merely chuckled, a low, easy sound that signaled his complete dismissal of Anisa's cryptic remark. He mistook her calculated words as a flirtatious joke, the playful banter of a trusted partner, fully invested in his corporate victory. His arrogance was the final blade twist to Anisa's heart. He was incapable of seeing her as anything other than an extension of his own ambition. Anisa watched him, her smile steady, utterly devoid of warmth. She allowed him to continue detailing the intricate, fragile dependency on the short-term debt instrument, the very vulnerability she now knew how to exploit. She memorized every number, every timeline, every point of failure. This wasn't revenge, this was survival. She had risked her deepest sanctuary for an ideal, and that ideal had responded with a secret legal trap. She would not allow her children to be born into a life defined by his cowardice and calculation. For the next 10 days, Anisa played the role of the devoted, engaged partner flawlessly. She was attentive, affectionate, and intellectually supportive, drawing out every piece of sensitive information he possessed about Ether Global's defenses. Liam, relieved that the initial awkwardness had passed and genuinely enjoying the light she brought, opened up completely. He confused her growing knowledge with growing devotion. He was blind to the fact that he was handing his most intimate secrets to the woman he had secretly betrayed. The intimacy between them continued, deepening into profound, intense emotional discovery, yet always shadowed by Anisa's hidden knowledge. She allowed herself to cherish those moments, mourning the beautiful, genuine love that could have been theirs, a love Liam's fear had systematically poisoned. She found herself weeping silently into her pillow after they made love, grieving the loss of the man she thought she had finally found. Her own body soon delivered the ultimate, irrevocable truth. One morning, alone in the sweeping marble bathroom of the villa, Anisa confirmed what she had suspected. She was pregnant. Not only that, a subsequent discreet communication with a trusted medical contact confirmed the miracle. Twins. The irony was crushing. She had delivered the impossible guarantee he had demanded, fulfilling her end of the bargain completely. Yet, the price of that success was her immediate departure, necessitated by the discovery of his sunset clause. She had given him everything, and in return he had ensured that she would be nothing to him after the birth. The pregnancy, rather than being a moment of shared joy, became the final countdown to her escape. She was no longer just Anisa, the secretary. She was the vessel of the Ward legacy, and her duty was now to protect that legacy from the man who created it. She initiated her counter-contingency plan with the same meticulous efficiency Liam had taught her. Using a secure burner device and the privileged information Liam had unwittingly provided, she began setting traps within Ether Global's digital defenses. She created encrypted, anonymous data packets detailing the critical debt vulnerability, scheduled to be released to a neutral financial regulator in exactly 3 weeks. 1 week before the hostile takeover vote. This action wouldn't destroy the company outright, but it would create enough instability and regulatory oversight to paralyze Liam's planned defense and effectively shut down his uncle's hostile bid. It was a corporate checkmate that would freeze the board and halt the sale, buying the children time and freedom. Her work complete, Anisa packed a small, carefully chosen bag, her passport, a secure bank document, and the USB drive containing the devastating Contingency Plan Gamma. She left behind the expensive clothing, the jewelry, and the life Liam had bought her. She only took what was necessary for survival, deliberately leaving no personal trace. She waited for the perfect moment. A planned satellite power outage Liam had been warned about. A window when his encrypted connection to the mainland would be completely severed. As the sun dipped below the turquoise horizon, bathing the villa in violent shades of orange and blood red, Anisa stood over Liam as he worked intently over a complex spreadsheet on the study table. "Liam," she said, her voice impossibly soft, "I have fulfilled my promise. I am pregnant." Liam's head snapped up, his face transformed, shock dissolving into a blinding, genuine joy that momentarily shattered his CEO mask. He rose, reaching for her, his hands trembling. "Anisa. God, Anisa. We did it. We actually did it. He was beautiful in that unguarded moment, the man she had always loved, but Anisa steeled her heart against the sight. This joy was for the heir, for the legacy, not for her. She gently evaded his embrace, stepping back toward the door. There is something else you need to know. She placed the unmarked USB drive and a short, handwritten note on the edge of the table, directly beside his spreadsheet. I have kept my word, Liam. I gave you my sanctuary, my whole self. Now I am taking back my choice. Your contingency plan, the one you hid on that drive, expires in 1 month after the twins are born. My loyalty, Liam, expired the moment I read it. His joy vanished, replaced by a devastating, slow comprehension. His eyes flickered to the USB drive, then to her. I have resigned, effective immediately, and I've done what was necessary to protect the future of the children you asked for. Before Liam could speak, before the shame and panic could fully register on his face, Anisa was gone. The villa door clicked shut, severing the connection. Liam stared at the USB drive and the note. He tore open the note. It contained a single, chilling, triumphant sentence that cut him deeper than any legal clause. You secured your legacy, Liam. Now, you must secure your freedom. I am gone, and the hostile bid against Ether Global will be activated by my counter-contingency in 7 days. The sudden, empty click of the villa door reverberated through Liam's chest like a gunshot. The sound wasn't just a closing door. It was the final severance of his last, fragile connection to trust. He remained standing, paralyzed, the profound joy of Anisa's pregnancy announcement evaporating instantly, replaced by a cold, stomach-churning horror. The USB drive and the note lay on the polished mahogany table, silent, devastating witnesses to his failure. He didn't need to read the memorandum on the drive again. The title, Contingency Plan Gamma, already screamed his guilt. He had foolishly believed his calculation was invisible, relying on Anisa's love and loyalty as a blanket guarantee. Now his carefully constructed emotional shield had been used as the very weapon to dismantle him. He had asked for her sanctuary, and she had given it, only to discover he planned to discard the sanctuary once he'd secured the treasure. Liam finally moved, his actions jerky and panicked. He grabbed the note first, his eyes scanning the elegant script that had once drafted his most sensitive internal memos, now delivering his death sentence. You secured your legacy, Liam. Now, you must secure your freedom. I am gone, and the hostile bid against Ether Global will be activated by my counter-contingency in 7 days. 7 days. That was the timeline for his uncle's hostile vote. Anisa wasn't just leaving, she was detonating his entire defense structure. She hadn't sought revenge for herself. She had orchestrated a corporate checkmate to protect the very children he had callously demanded. She had prioritized their stability over his corporate reign. He grabbed the satellite phone, his fingers trembling, and frantically tried to connect. The power outage she had waited for had begun, leaving him cut off, physically and corporately isolated. He screamed her name into the silent, beautiful villa, the sound swallowed by the towering walls and the crashing waves outside. The man who had always controlled the variables was now utterly, helplessly controlled. The next 48 hours were a descent into corporate hell. As soon as the satellite power flickered back on, Liam made contact with his lawyer, screaming for a full corporate audit. The lawyer, bewildered by Liam's panic, confirmed the digital records. Anisa was now classified under a high-risk, high-value contingency employment clause, ensuring she had no current claim on the company except for the massive compensation package scheduled for post-delivery. Liam realized the horrifying truth. The legal trap he had set to secure his escape had failed to account for a counterattack. Simultaneously, the first anonymous data packets, Anisa's counter-contingency, hit the financial news wires and the regulatory bodies. The packets detailed a critical, single vulnerability in Ether Global's financial architecture: the over-reliance on the short-term debt instrument that Liam had just confided to Anisa. The timing was too perfect, the details too granular. Liam knew instantly that only he and Anisa possessed that knowledge. The news ripped through the markets like wildfire. Confidence in Ether Global plummeted. The board called an emergency session, not to fight the hostile bid, but to question Liam's solvency and leadership. The regulatory bodies launched an immediate invasive investigation, freezing the very debt instrument Liam needed to defend the company against his uncle's takeover. Anisa's action hadn't destroyed the company, but it had successfully paralyzed it. By exposing the corporate defense's flaw, she created a massive regulatory complication that effectively halted all corporate maneuvers, including the hostile takeover vote, buying the children time and ensuring that when the dust settled, the company would be under ethical, if scrutinized, management, not his uncle's greedy control. The hostile bid was neutralized, but Liam's reputation was annihilated. He was no longer the brilliant, untouchable CEO. He was the desperate, reckless child who nearly brought down his father's empire. His shame was absolute, a crushing realization that his fear had led him to commit an act of betrayal against the only person who had ever truly, fully believed in him. He searched for her with a desperate frenzy that defied logic. He mobilized private investigators, using all his resources, not to silence her, but to find her, to beg her forgiveness. The investigators came back empty. Anisa, the brilliant executive assistant, had covered her tracks flawlessly, disappearing completely into the vastness of the world, protected by her own calculated escape plan. Liam flew back to New York, landing in a corporate landscape that was unrecognizable. He walked into his penthouse, now feeling like a tomb, and saw the jagged fragments of the torn contract still scattered on the marble floor where they had fallen weeks ago. He had demanded a transaction, and she had delivered the ultimate non-negotiable price: his loss. He had secured his legacy through a selfish, cruel demand, only to lose the woman and the trust that gave that legacy meaning. He was alone, wealthy beyond measure, and utterly, profoundly lost. His greatest fear had come true, but not in the way he expected. He hadn't lost his company to his uncle. He had lost his future to his own cowardice. The twins he had demanded were safe, but the sanctuary he desperately craved, Anisa's heart, was gone forever, replaced by the chilling corporate chaos he had created. He knew then that the only path to redemption was to stop fighting the world and start fighting the man in the mirror. 3 months passed. Liam had managed to stabilize the company under regulatory oversight, but he was a ghost of his former self. His personal assistant brought him a large, heavily padded, unmarked envelope delivered by a specialized courier. Inside, he found no letter, no legal document, only a high-resolution, black-and-white printout of a recent ultrasound. On the grainy image, two distinct, perfect forms were visible: the twins he had demanded. Pinned to the photo was a single airline boarding pass stub from an international flight dated last week, with the destination deliberately obscured, leaving Liam with a devastating, terrifying hope. Anisa was not only safe, but she had reached out, proving she was still watching him, still controlling the terms of their fate. The heavily padded, unmarked envelope sat on the cold mahogany of Liam's desk, a stark anomaly in the desolate corporate landscape of his life. 3 months had dragged by since Anisa's escape and her devastating but ultimately stabilizing corporate checkmate. Liam had spent those weeks stabilizing Ether Global, not with the ruthless aggression of a billionaire, but with the grueling, meticulous compliance of a man focused on genuine ethical reform. He was a ghost of his former self, his ambition replaced by a gnawing, profound shame. He was no longer fighting merely for profit. He was fighting for the ethical survival of his father's legacy, the one thing Anisa's counter-contingency had left him with. His personal assistant, hesitant and silent, had placed the package there, its delivery untraceable, a phantom trace of the woman who held his future. Liam opened it with trembling hands. Inside there was no letter, no demand, no accusation, only a single high-resolution, black-and-white printout of a recent ultrasound. On the grainy image, two distinct, perfect forms were visible, their small, emerging shapes unmistakable. The twins he had demanded. Liam sank into his chair, the image gripping his heart with a terrifying, absolute force. This was his family. This was the vulnerable, beautiful reality he had nearly annihilated through his fear and transactional thinking. He studied the image, his eyes burning, seeing not the heirs to a corporate empire, but the living proof of Anisa's profound sacrifice and the pure love she had risked for him. This silent communication confirmed everything. She was safe, the children were thriving, and she was in control. Pinned to the corner of the ultrasound was a single, used airline boarding pass stub from an international flight dated last week. The destination was deliberately obscured with heavy black marker, but the flight code and the originating city were visible. It was a city in southern India, a place Anisa had once spoken of with quiet longing, a vibrant, spiritual place known for its artistic community and profound solitude. The gesture was a masterpiece of control. It was not a plea for help. It was not a request for money. It was Anisa's way of saying, I am safe. The children are safe. I am watching your movements. It was a calculated, agonizing injection of hope. A test to see if the man she had loved had finally emerged from the prison of the CEO. She was granting him the privilege of knowing, but denying him the power of knowing where. Liam immediately mobilized his private resources, not the cold, corporate investigators of before, but a small, trusted team dedicated solely to humanitarian tracing. He issued new, strict directives: no aggressive contact, no surveillance, only confirmation of her location and safety. He was learning, slowly, agonizingly, to respect the distance she demanded, understanding that if he pushed with the force of his old ego, he would lose her forever. He had to earn the right to ask. He began his personal redemption publicly. The corporate world had expected him to fight the hostile bid by crushing his uncle and exploiting legal loopholes. Instead, Liam began methodically dismantling the ruthless persona that had defined him. He held an unprecedented press conference focused not on market performance, but on personal and corporate integrity. He admitted to the media, in carefully coded language, that he had prioritized corporate fear over human connection, leading to a profound personal and financial failure. The honesty was shocking and unprecedented for a man of his stature, yet it was the only genuine currency he had left. The key moment came when he faced the demanding shareholders. He decided to relinquish the very power he had killed to protect. He publicly announced that he was placing the company's ultimate control into a new, transparent, ethical foundation, led by a neutral board of directors, effectively neutralizing his uncle's hostile threat by removing the financial prize. He sacrificed a significant piece of his inherited wealth, demonstrating that he valued the company's moral compass and stability over his own absolute control. The action was baffling to his peers, but it sent a clear, undeniable message to the one person whose opinion now truly mattered. He was choosing integrity over empire. He also started cleaning his own house with surgical precision. He personally fired the lawyers who had drafted Contingency Plan Gamma, making a public example of the immense cost of calculating human relationships. He ensured the massive compensation package, the one originally designed to dismiss Anisa, was placed into an untouchable trust fund for the twins, with Anisa named the sole, unconstrained administrator. He was attempting to retroactively honor the broken terms of their original understanding, proving that the betrayal had ended and that his word, untainted by legal fine print, was now his bond. He knew he was living under Anisa's careful surveillance, treating every decision, every public utterance, as part of the silent, agonizing process of earning back her trust. He was transforming Ether Global from a predatory giant into a model of responsible technology, his reputation slowly shifting from ruthless young CEO to reformed, thoughtful leader. He needed her to see that the man who betrayed her was dead, and the man who loved her had finally emerged. Liam stared at the obscured location on the boarding pass stub, a profound ache in his chest. He had delivered the corporate proof of his change, but he desperately needed a sign that his personal sacrifice was enough. He needed to know that the woman who held the key to his future was finally ready to accept the man he had become. Weeks turned into another month. Liam continued his commitment to ethical reform, knowing that any slip would instantly close the door Anisa had left ajar. He dedicated himself entirely to the twins' trust, ensuring every legal protection was in place, meticulously planning their future without making any assumption about his own role in it. He was now working tirelessly, not for profit, but for stability, driven only by the terrifying hope of reunion. One afternoon, a second package arrived. This time it was a small, express-shipped box, bearing the same discreet courier stamp as the first. Inside, he found a book. It wasn't a business journal or a legal textbook, but an antique edition of Rumi's poetry, a writer Anisa adored, and whose verses often spoke of the profound cost of the ego. Liam's hands shook as he flipped through the aged pages, searching for a clue. He found a specific section dog-eared and underlined in her precise, elegant hand. The passage spoke of the ultimate sacrifice, the necessity of losing everything, wealth, status, ambition, to finally find one's true, unburdened self. It was a clear, poetic reference to his recent public relinquishing of power. She was acknowledging his surrender. Attached to the facing page was a third and final piece of paper. It wasn't a demanding letter, but a simple, laminated, high-quality printout of his original resignation request, the one Anisa had drafted and sent to the board months ago. But across the bottom, she had added a single handwritten line in dark, powerful ink. "You have answered the test. I will choose my home now. The twins are due in 2 weeks." Liam felt a violent rush of relief and terrifying urgency. This was it, the declaration that the time for silence and separation was over. The cryptic message was a declaration that his redemption had been accepted. The destination was still hidden, but the timeline was terrifyingly immediate. He had 2 weeks, 14 days, to find her, not as the CEO, but as the man who had finally earned the right to be a father and a partner. He immediately called his personal security chief. "Find the nearest international hospital facility to that city in India," he commanded, his voice tight with controlled desperation. "But do it quietly. I need to be on the next flight out. Cancel all meetings, all communication. Effective immediately." He was abandoning his empire, throwing aside the control he once cherished, all for a single chance at his family. As he was boarding the plane hours later, exhausted and operating on pure adrenaline, he received one final anonymous message, a single GPS coordinate sent via an untraceable encrypted channel. The message was accompanied by two simple words: "The Sanctuary." He plotted the coordinates immediately on his secure tablet. The location pointed not to a sterile urban hospital, but to a remote, high-altitude birthing center near the coast, far from any city center. Anisa was ensuring their reunion would be entirely on her terms. He realized Anisa wasn't just watching, she was controlling the entire final chapter of his redemption arc. She was dictating the terms of their reunion with the same calculated precision he had once used for his corporate deals. She was demanding that his final act of faith be one of vulnerability, leaving behind the safety of his wealth and power to meet her in the place she defined as their true home, a place where his money meant nothing and his heart meant everything. He sat back in the plush leather seat of the plane, a profound calm washing over him despite the ticking clock. He was no longer the calculated CEO fighting a hostile takeover. He was simply a man racing towards the woman he loved and the children who represented his only future. The betrayal was behind him. The reckoning was ahead. The final message from Anisa's secure channel arrived just as the plane took off, a single, agonizing photograph. It was a selfie of her, smiling gently, her brown skin glowing, her hugely pregnant abdomen prominently visible. Behind her, through a simple window, Liam recognized the familiar, distinctive architecture of the coastal birthing center. Pinned to the photo was a final, devastating line of text that cut through his calm. "I went into labor 3 hours ago, Liam. You have 7 hours before your twins are born. Hurry, or you will miss the only moment that truly matters." The photograph, Anisa's gentle, determined smile against the backdrop of the coastal birthing center, had paralyzed Liam for a fraction of a second. But the line of text underneath: "I went into labor 3 hours ago, Liam. You have 7 hours before your twins are born. Hurry, or you will miss the only moment that truly matters," sent a primal shockwave through his system. The control he had cherished for so long was completely gone. His life was now governed by the unstoppable, biological force of Anisa's body. The panic was absolute, but the training of the CEO kicked in instantly. He was still hours of flight time from landing. He frantically negotiated a helicopter relay as soon as the jet reached the nearest viable landing strip, overriding every safety protocol and throwing the full force of his remaining wealth into compressing time. He was no longer thinking of stock prices or hostile bids. He was thinking only of the woman he had betrayed and the fragile lives he might miss entering the world. The journey from the airport to the remote coastal center was brutal. The helicopter dropped him off in the nearest small village, forcing him to rely on a battered local taxi for the final, excruciatingly long, jarring drive along the winding cliff roads. The deliberate lack of luxury was Anisa's final, silent test. Was he willing to endure discomfort and relinquish control to reach her? He abandoned his suitcase, his secure comms, everything that signified the corporate titan. He arrived in a rumpled suit, his face etched with hours of terror and exhaustion, just a man desperate for forgiveness. He found the center tucked into a cliffside, a collection of simple sun-bleached stucco buildings facing the turbulent sea, beautiful, spiritual, and utterly devoid of anything that suggested the name Ward. He dismissed the driver, sending his last link to his former life away, and walked up the sandy path alone, guided only by the fading light of the afternoon sun. He was met at the entrance by a calm, elderly midwife. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, held no judgment, only a profound, silent assessment of the man who had arrived too late. "You must be the father," she stated simply. "She said you would come, but she also said you would wait." "Wait." Liam's voice was hoarse, a desperate cry. "The twins. Anisa is in labor. How long? I need to see her now." "She is in profound labor, Mr. Ward," the midwife informed him gently. "She is fighting for the birth of your children with a fierce, quiet strength. She needs solitude now. She is in the final stages of the sacrifice. But she left a message for you. She said, if he truly understands the cost of betrayal, he will respect the boundary until the ultimate sacrifice is made. He must confront his shame alone." Liam was utterly shattered. He had raced across continents, thrown away his empire, and sacrificed his wealth, only to arrive and be confined to the agonizing witness of his own helplessness. His entire redemption had been a race against the clock, and he had arrived just as the most sacred, terrifying clock of all was running out. He was confined to a small, simple room nearby, forced to listen to the faint, distant sounds of her intense, quiet struggle, unable to offer comfort, forced into excruciating contemplation. Hours stretched into an eternity of self-recrimination. He sat on the simple wooden cot, reviewing his monumental failure. He realized that the greatest lie he had ever told was not to Anisa, but to himself, the lie that control equated to safety. He had prioritized the stability of his corporate defense structure over the sanctity of her heart, destroying the woman he loved. He had asked for her whole self, her sanctuary, knowing he only intended to use her as a temporary vessel, betraying the very core of trust their friendship was built upon. The full weight of his actions crashed down. He hadn't just destroyed a relationship. He had endangered the woman he loved and the children he craved, all because he was too much of a coward to face the risk of genuine, messy love. He finally saw the distinction. Anisa's sacrifice was giving him her future. His betrayal was planning to take it back. He understood, with a certainty that transcended any corporate truth, that he deserved to lose her. He deserved only the solitude of his empty corporate empire. Just as the sun began to paint the horizon in shades of desperate gold, the midwife appeared in his doorway. Her face was weary but held a transcendent calm. "She is finished with the fight, Mr. Ward," the midwife whispered. "The children are here. They are perfect. And she asks to see you now. She said you are worthy of this moment, but she has one final, important condition for you." Liam rushed from the room, his corporate attire rumpled and stained, his heart pounding a frantic, irregular rhythm against his ribs. He followed the midwife down a short, flower-lined corridor to a large, bright room bathed in the morning light. The air was thick with the scent of sea salt, earth, and new life. Anisa was propped up on the bed, looking utterly exhausted but transcendently beautiful. Her brown skin glowed with the undeniable power of creation, and her eyes, though heavy, were clear and unwavering. Between her arms, swaddled in soft white cloth, lay the twins, a tiny boy and a tiny girl, their faces peaceful and perfect. Liam stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move past the threshold. This was it, the ultimate reckoning, the climax of their impossible pact. He looked at the children, his children, then at Anisa, the woman he had betrayed. The words of apology, the grand declarations of love, and the pathetic excuses died in his throat. No carefully phrased corporate contrition could cover the magnitude of his crime. He could only stare, humbled and broken, at the miracle he had almost missed. Anisa looked at him, her eyes holding no malice, only profound exhaustion and an unwavering, testing strength. She reached out, not to him, but to the small body of the infant boy, gently adjusting the blanket. "Come in, Liam," she finally whispered, her voice fragile but firm, carrying the absolute authority of a woman who had just stared down death and won. "I kept my promise. You have your family." He took one shaky step, his vision blurred by unshed tears. "Stop there," she commanded, her voice regaining its strength. "Before you even touch them, before you say a single word of apology or proposal, you must answer one question. The integrity of our children's lives rests on your answer. You came here late, you came here broken, and I know why. Now you must choose." She leaned forward slightly, her brow furrowed in fierce determination. "Who are you choosing right now, Liam? Tell me the truth. Are you the father who rushed here to claim heirs for a corporate legacy, still secretly planning a contingency? Or are you the man who is willing to walk away from his entire empire for the woman he loves, even if she refuses to take you back?" The condition was staggering. She wasn't asking for love. She was asking for proof that his betrayal was permanently excised from his heart. She was demanding that he choose her, not as his partner, but as his sole priority, even if that choice meant complete, unrewarded sacrifice. She needed to know that the man who had betrayed her would die, and a new, honest man would stand in his place. Liam looked down at the floor, the remnants of his old self crumbling under the weight of her demand. He looked back up at her, at the tiny lives resting in her arms, and the answer was no longer a calculation, but a simple, absolute truth. He took a slow, deliberate breath, preparing to sacrifice the last piece of his old identity. Liam didn't speak the words of apology or love. Instead, he made a final, decisive movement, one that had nothing to do with contracts or corporate power. He pulled the rumpled satellite phone from his pocket, the last link to his empire, and with a raw, guttural cry, he threw it across the room. It struck the far wall and shattered into a dozen useless pieces, symbolically destroying the control, the communication, and the fear that had been the genesis of his betrayal. He looked at Anisa, his eyes wet but clear. "I choose you, Anisa. I choose you over the world. The company belongs to the foundation. My future belongs to these children. And if you refuse to take me back, I will dedicate my life to simply serving you and them. I am not leaving, but I am here without claim." He had offered the ultimate unconditional sacrifice, but Anisa still held the power of acceptance, and her expression remained unreadable, forcing the audience to wait for the final outcome. The shattering sound of the satellite phone hitting the far wall was the true climax of Liam's redemption. It was the absolute, irreversible destruction of the last vestige of his corporate identity and the physical manifestation of the control and fear that had fueled his betrayal. He stood there, disheveled and empty-handed, a billionaire reduced to a simple, terrified man seeking grace. He looked at Anisa, his eyes wet but clear, his voice rough with emotion. "I choose you, Anisa. I choose you over the world. The company belongs to the foundation. My future belongs to these children. And if you refuse to take me back, I will dedicate my life to simply serving you and them. I am not leaving, but I am here without claim." He had offered the ultimate, unconditional sacrifice, giving up the very empire he had used her to save. Anisa watched him, the exhaustion of labor fading into a profound, intense assessment. She saw the genuine pain in his eyes, the real, raw terror that had replaced the cold calculation. She saw the man she had loved for a decade, finally stripped bare, exposed, and choosing vulnerability over power. Her strength had never been in her corporate acumen, but in her capacity to love unconditionally, and now he had finally matched her intensity. She reached out her free hand not to console him, but to test the sincerity of his sacrifice. "The foundation," she whispered, her voice still thin but carrying absolute clarity. "The ethical foundation you created, is that truly free of any potential clause or loophole that could return absolute control to you or to your uncle, should I choose to remain separate from you?" Liam stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers, the space between them closing after months of agonized separation. "It is ironclad, Anisa. I signed the definitive trust agreement the day I flew here. I forfeited my controlling interest entirely. I retained only a managing position, purely administrative. The Ward legacy will continue ethically, without the need for my absolute power. The children are financially secure through the compensation trust, and the company is stable under the new board. My need for control is over. The price for betraying you was losing my throne." Anisa nodded slowly, a small, subtle tremor of relief running through her body. He had not just said the right words, he had executed the definitive, costly action. He had chosen integrity, proving that her counter-contingency and his subsequent redemption had worked. The danger of his calculated betrayal was neutralized forever. "Good," she murmured, "because I did not ask you here for a transaction, Liam. I asked you here to prove that you could choose love over the legacy. And now that you have given up the legacy, you can finally accept the love that was always here." Tears streamed silently down Liam's face. He fell to his knees beside the bed, unable to stand, his rigid posture finally collapsing into a posture of worshipful surrender. He didn't touch her. He didn't touch the children. He just lowered his head, his forehead resting lightly on the cool sheet beside the infant girl. "I don't deserve you," he choked out, the words ripped from his soul. "I treated your sanctuary as a means to an end. I am unworthy of your forgiveness, Anisa." "You are unworthy of the man you were," she corrected, her voice now softening, infused with the tenderness she had held back for months. "But that man is gone. The man who is kneeling here is the one I risked everything for." She gently lifted the infant boy from the swaddling, shifting the tiny, perfect bundle slightly in her arms, and then she finally reached out to Liam, not with her hand, but with the precious, fragile proof of their new life. "Look at them, Liam," she whispered. "Look at the twins you asked for. They were conceived not in a moment of contractual necessity, but in moments where our shields cracked, where the deep truth of our connection broke through your fear. They are not heirs to an empire. They are the genesis of our home." Liam raised his head, his eyes meeting hers, and then falling to the two faces nestled against her chest. The sight of his children, his son and daughter, was the most beautiful, terrifying thing he had ever witnessed. It was the realization that his greatest achievement was not any corporate merger, but the creation of this small, breathing, perfect family. Anisa slowly shifted the boy, carefully settling him into Liam's trembling hands. The weight of the child, his child, was insignificant, yet it felt like the entire world. Liam held his son, his thumb stroking the soft curve of the infant's cheek, the contact electrifying and humbling. He was a father, redeemed not by wealth, but by surrender. Liam held his son, utterly speechless, the weight of the tiny life feeling like the true weight of his newfound responsibility. He looked from the boy to Anisa, then to the girl resting against her mother, understanding for the first time that his life's purpose had completely inverted. The man who valued control over chaos was now holding the beautiful, fragile chaos of new life, and he wouldn't trade it for every fortune in the world. Anisa watched the transformation, seeing the final barriers fall. His touch was hesitant, reverent, and utterly free of his past calculation. The father had finally arrived, completely eclipsing the CEO. "We did this, Liam," Anisa said softly. "We created this family out of a betrayal, but also out of the deep, enduring truth of our connection. We cannot erase the past, but we can build the future on honesty." Liam lowered his head again, pressing his cheek gently against the baby's blanket. "I promise you, Anisa, that I will spend every day of the rest of my life earning the right to be called their father and earning the right to be called your husband. I will never allow fear or ambition to compromise the sanctuary you gave me again." He raised his head, pulling his gaze from the infant to her face. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat, the same coat that had traveled continents, now rumpled and worthless, and pulled out a small velvet box. It was not the massive, ostentatious diamond he would have chosen as the CEO, but a simple antique gold band, a symbol of enduring commitment, chosen in haste and sincerity. "I don't offer you an empire, Anisa," he whispered, his voice thick with the finality of his surrender. "I offer you my whole life, rebuilt from the ashes of my pride. I offer you my heart, completely and without clause. Marry me. Let us build our home here, or anywhere you choose, but let us build it together." Anisa's face broke into the first genuine, relieved smile he had seen in 6 agonizing months. The battle was over. Her faith, her strength, and her calculated risk had won. She had demanded a sacrifice, and he had delivered his entire self. "Yes, Liam," she said simply, tears finally welling in her eyes, not tears of pain, but of powerful, absolute relief. "Yes, I will choose you, Because the man who threw away his phone and his power to find me is the man I always knew was underneath the surface. He carefully passed the baby back to her, and then, without further words, he climbed onto the bed, sliding gently beneath the blanket beside her. He didn't reach for her or for the children immediately. He simply rested his body beside hers, a profound physical commitment to partnership and rest. He put his arm around her, resting his cheek against the pillow next to hers, finally allowing the exhaustion and emotional trauma of the last months to claim him. The midwife quietly entered the room with tea and a simple contract. It wasn't a corporate document, but a marriage certificate. Liam signed it, using the simple wooden pen, his signature now free of the cold, controlling loops of the CEO. Anisa signed it beneath him. They were married quietly, intimately, right there in the birthing room, surrounded by the fragile, perfect evidence of their difficult, beautiful beginning. The final scene of the story dissolves into an image months later. Liam is seen sitting on the floor of a sunny, simple nursery in the coastal villa, not in a suit, but in comfortable clothes, laughing softly as he simultaneously manages to feed a bottle to the boy twin and rock the girl twin in a simple wooden cradle. Anisa watches him from the doorway, her heart full, her sanctuary completely safe. The empire was saved, but the true legacy, the family built on honesty, forgiveness, and unconditional love, was finally secured. The billionaire had asked for twins. In return, his virgin secretary friend had given him his soul. The end.